Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this really wonderful seminar or conference. It's been an honor that I can collaborate with Resource Center to celebrate the 50th anniversary with them, and it's actually on behalf of Hong Kong U, and such an honor. I'm going to talk about the topic about suicide and suicide prevention and postvention. May I ask, before I start, how many of you have actually the first time to listen to a topic on suicide bereavement? Raise your hand. Wow, okay. And I have to tell you, this topic has not been really discussed among a lot of people. Recently, we have published a book on this topic with the Samaritans Defenders of Hong Kong. And I've been given book talks for like over 6 times over the past 2 months. And every time when we go into the community and talk about the book on this topic, there are over 10 people. They come to us and say, well, I have been a bereaved person over suicide for over 20 years. I've never talked about this topic with people. So the plan for my talk today is, I've been given an hour to talk about this, but I would love to only talk for like 30 minutes, and I'll leave ample time to have a conversation with you. This is a topic that I think we need much more discussion on this, okay? But I hope you don't mind. But I will go over the pattern of suicide over the world and Hong Kong first, so that you know how many people are actually affected by the issue about suicide over the world. And then I will talk about something that I hope will be much more positive than just staying at the traumatic experience of suffering from suicide bereavement. Okay, so let me talk about a little bit about myself first. I started to do suicide prevention research for over 20 years now. I came back from Australia as a psychologist from Australia to Hong Kong in 2003. My first task of being a research assistant at Hong Kong U was to actually interview with hundreds of people bereaved by suicide. So my task was to understand why Hong Kong people kill themselves over suicide. So there are many ways of understanding that phenomenon. First, we can study suicide notes of people who kill themselves. But the fact is, only 30% of people who kill themselves left suicide notes, and many of the suicide notes actually has no details. There are only like numbers, how many money that I have invested, and how many money that I left for the people behind that. And there are some hatred messages that they blame people that they may be responsible for killing myself. So one of the ways is to interview the parents, the loved ones of those who killed themselves, and so that to find out why people kill themselves. So if you look at this particular figure, according to the World Health Organization, per year, there were about 700,000 people they kill themselves per year. 700,000. So that's actually really a lot of people. And if you can look at these, the darker color actually represent the highest suicide ratio. We normally, when we explain to people how many people they kill themselves, we use suicide rate instead of numbers. Because there are a lot of people in India, there are a lot of people in China, so we convert them into suicide ratio. So in terms of ratio, we say that among 100,000 people, how many people kill themselves. So you can see, basically, in Russia, in Mongolia, in some parts of Africa, they have a really high suicide rate, and the darkest number, it's like 20 or 25 per 100,000. China used to be one of the highest ones, but now, because of the development and the advancement of the healthcare services. So China has become one of the middle one instead of the highest one. And this particular figure, there's a lot of risk factors for suicide you can talk about. Let me ask you, why do you think that Russia has one of the highest suicide rates in the world? Anyone? Too dark in the winter. Why too dark in the winter would impact on the suicide rate?
大家可以講中文嘅，佢識聽嘅。
天黑自然個人會比較冇陽光會呢個令到你嘅黑色素褪黑素減低咯。
Let me ask, how many of you in the audience are not understanding Cantonese? Raise your hand. Or just two, just one, two. Okay. Okay. So the lady was saying that because of lack of vitamin D and sunlight that push people to be depressed in a sense. So we do have a thing called seasonal affective disorder that actually make people in darkness and they are more depressed in a sense. What else? Excellent. People in Russia, I have talked to psychiatrists from Russia, and they were saying that people, they are depressed, they actually don't see psychologists and psychiatrists. They turn to vodka instead. So that was one of the remedial ways of dealing with depression. And how about India? We have audience from... Lack of resources. Lack of what kind of resources? Actually medical. Medical is a big thing. So lack of medical resources is a big thing that contributing to the rate of suicide. How about Hong Kong? Well, this is the trend of Hong Kong. I would love to raise your awareness of what's happening in Hong Kong lately. I came back in 2003 and started my career in suicide prevention at the peak. At that time, we have a suicide rate of 18, which is 20 to 30% above the world average. Fortunately, after 2003, beyond the SARS and the high unemployment rate and then all these financial issues, the suicide rate came down and become relatively stable for the past 15 years. And actually, during COVID, the suicide rate came down a little bit, unlike what we expected. At the beginning of COVID, we were saying that, so many people were going to be unemployed and there are lots of isolations and loneliness and whatnot. But then actually the suicide rate came down. Anyone want to have a guess why suicide came down in COVID? This is actually really amazing, unexpectedly. So, what does it mean? Okay. Okay. Well, it has nothing to do with they couldn't go out, because people in Hong Kong, they kill themselves by jumping. So they could still go up to whatever buildings. But we suspect that during COVID, there are lots of companionship and actually people stay at home, and the stress of work actually was less than the normal days. And then there has been a phenomenon called the honeymoon period. What that means is, at the beginning of COVID and we were really concerned about something, we were actually sharing resources and we were connected. Do you still remember people help each other by buying facial masks at the beginning? That was the time actually people connected. That was what we call the honeymoon period. But after that, starting from 2022, that was the end of COVID. And then suicide rate went up. This is not unique in Hong Kong. It's actually happening around the world. Any reasons to explain this? And stress came back. And what else? Okay, students went back to school. But I have to tell you, the suicide rates in Hong Kong, the highest risk people are not actually students. Students only account for a small percentage of suicides in Hong Kong. Elderly are at the actually highest rate. Anyhow, so it's actually really concerning. I was talking to the committee just then. Since the beginning of September last year until today, there have been 19 students. They killed themselves over the past 8 months now. And elderly with loneliness and isolation, elderly actually rise as well. So if you look at this is the breakdown of what happened in 2021. I could not show you the latest figure of suicide in Hong Kong because Hong Kong has a really stringent system of registering how many people kill themselves. It has to go through a coroner's court system to find out whether people they die by accident or they die by falling or suicide. So on your left-hand side, the red color actually are the female, and the right-hand side are actually the male. So you can see there are actually more males die by suicide than females. I'm sure many of you are actually counselors and psychologists or helping professionals. Can you tell us or explain why there are more males die by suicide than females? How? They don't seek help. Okay. What else? So they have difficulties of expressing themselves. Anything else? Lately, I've been looking into masculinity and mental health. Actually, there are not a lot of research on how understanding of why men don't seek help. And a lot of services, I'm sure you know, they provide services and the one who actually sought help, they are females. Men don't really seek help. And one of the things why men is like 2 to 1, 2 male and 1 female die by suicide in Hong Kong. In Western society, it's about 3 or 4 to 1. Men always choose the most lethal way of killing themselves. Females sometimes use drugs, overdose, but men use like jumping and hanging or carbon monoxide. Anyhow, so there's a thing called hegemonic masculinity, meaning men always want to show that they are really masculine. If they seek help, it's a face-losing thing. And men express the way of depression different to females. Men always use drugs and alcohol or gambling to deal with their depression. Females more like to talk to people. Anyhow, so this is the situation in Hong Kong. So when we talk about suicide prevention, we have different layers of doing things. We use that as a public health approach. So you can see on your left-hand side, we always start with the individual level. So for the individual level, these are all the factors that might be contributing to why people die by suicide.
There are genetic factors, I'm sure you know. There are genetic factors and environmental issues that lead people to be more prone to have mental illnesses. There's another thing, is the family history. Family history, it's related to what? Again, sometimes it's about genetic. So for example, if your parents or if someone's parents have psychiatric history in the past or suicidal attempt in the past, their offsprings will be more likely to have risk factors for suicide. Chronic pain is another issue, and that might be one of the contributing factors to elderly suicide. Hopelessness is really, now it's a big thing in the world, not just in Hong Kong. Loneliness and hopelessness are really common among young people and elderly people. So you might know, in UK and Japan, they actually have the Ministry of Loneliness to deal with the loneliness issue now. Job and financial loss is particularly important in Hong Kong. 20 years when I started the study on understanding why people kill themselves, one of the subgroup that I really look into is the middle-aged people, 30 to 50. From what we found from the research, there are priorities of risk factors. The first one, obviously, is the suffering of psychiatric disorders. The second one is the history of suicide attempt. So from 0 to 1, no suicide attempt, to 1 suicide attempt, it's that big. But once people have done the first time, it might be easier for them to do the second time and the third time. The third one is actually unemployment for middle-aged people. So job loss is a big thing for middle-aged people's suicide. Job loss is not just about losing financial support. It's actually the loss of identity. So that is why jobless is one thing. Harmful use of alcohol, like what we talked about in Russia. And alcohol affect the frontal functioning of the brain and makes people become more impulsive. Then obviously mental disorders. There are ranking of mental disorders related to suicide. The first one is psychosis. The second one is depression in Hong Kong. Guess what is the third one in Hong Kong? Psychosis, depression. The third one is actually pathological gambling. Now it's called problematic gambling. That is a really unique finding in Hong Kong. Anyhow, then as I talked about, previous suicide attempt is a big thing. Relationship, that goes beyond individual. Lacking of support and relationship is a really big risk factor. So among all these risk factors, we found that social support is the strongest protective factor for suicide. So instead of finding professional help, promoting good social relationship is a big protective factor for suicide prevention. At the community, you can see discrimination is actually really a big thing. So I have to tell you guys, one of the biggest reason why it's my honor to collaborate with Resource is they provide counseling service in 14 languages, if I'm not wrong. This is one of the very few NGO in Hong Kong that provides such a big range of multilingual counseling in Hong Kong. There are about 8% of people living in Hong Kong, they are non-Chinese. Of course, there are domestic workers, but we have Indians, we have Pakistanis, we have Nepalese. They have been in Hong Kong for a long time. Now they are in their third generations. They live and they grow up in Hong Kong, but some of them still don't really speak Cantonese. And they do not have a lot of access to resources in Hong Kong. So discrimination and stigmatization is a big thing in suicide prevention. Okay, going up to the top, the most effective way of suicide prevention is actually limiting access to means. 有冇人知點解啊? Does anyone know why the most effective way is limiting access to means? And which is why Hong Kong is so hard in doing suicide prevention. Exactly. Well, there has been a lot of research and saying CBT and whatever psychotherapy works or antidepressant works and whatnot. But actually, after all these years of research, we found that limiting access to means has been the most effective way. But it's really hard to do. For example, in the US, people use a lot of guns to kill themselves. But it's really hard to limit access to guns because it's the right of the US citizens to have guns. In Hong Kong, the most common way is jumping. But we live in high-rise buildings. We work in high-rise buildings, so we have limited access to. It is unable to limit access to high buildings. But there are some unique examples in Hong Kong that happens. There are actually hot spots in Hong Kong that are famous for killing themselves. 知唔知喺邊度啊？ Excellent. Changzhou used to be one of the notorious way of killing yourself. People went to Changzhou and then they rent a holiday flat and they kill themselves. But now Changzhou has no longer become a notorious place. Do you know why? Huh? The owner will look for the charcoal. Let me tell you the story. In 1997, the first case went to Changzhou and then ran a holiday fair and become a really famous case study. And after that, there have been like at least 10 people each year. They went to Changzhou and then they ran the holiday flat and killed themselves. In about 2002, the Changzhou committee, the Changzhou community, they formed their own suicide prevention committee with the holiday flat owners, with the police, with the counselors, with social workers, and then there was a priest with no resources. They built their own community prevention program. So they have division of labor. Police would actually patrol much more often when the ferry park the ferry. Police will patrol and then look at people if they look depressed. They will go and ask, why do you come to Changzhou? It actually worked. And then for the holiday flat owners, they refuse to rent holiday flat to single person or even the same gender couple. Because there were cases that 2 men or 2 females actually went and ran holiday flats. And then the priest and the social worker, they train some of the people on Changzhou to spot people who look depressed. So after they have implemented this suicide prevention program for like 3 years, it went from 10 cases per year to 1 or 2 cases on Changzhou. So that message has to be really spread across. Sometimes when we talk about suicide prevention, it's not so much about just resources. It's about connectedness and how bottom-up workforce can help. Anyhow, so on your right-hand side, on your left-hand side is the risk factors. On your right-hand side are the things that we can do that actually leads into what I am going to talk about today. We have indicator, we have selective and universal layers. On the top is called universal, meaning that the whole community, with the whole country, with the whole region can do. For example, raising awareness about mental health, substance use disorder and suicide, that's actually what I'm doing. So that's the talk that I'm doing now. It's called universal prevention. At the middle, it's called the selective one. We call intervention for vulnerable groups. There are different vulnerable groups, people who are stigmatized, people with mental disorders, people with financial issues and employment issues. One of the groups that I look into is actually the people bereaved by suicide. this group is always under-researched, under-cared for, because a lot of people put the attention of those who attempt suicide, or those who kill themselves. But the left behind people, no one really talks about. So this is what I'm focusing now, is the people bereaved by suicide. In the US, they were called survivors, but there are some issues about using the word survivors, because sometimes survivors are used for people who have attempted suicide. They survive from suicide attempt. So we really want to use the term called PBS. It's called people bereaved by suicide to rectify the misunderstanding of the word survivors. In 2014, Lancet Psychiatry has published the first systematic review on this topic. The authors of the article, they look into all the literature about suicide bereavement, and they have made some recommendations. And the one that I highlight are actually the risk, the group that at the higher risk of suffering from suicide bereavement. They were including increased risk of required admission to psychiatric care for parents bereaved by suicide. So parents whose children die by suicide are actually at a higher risk. And also mothers bereaved by an adult child, not young children, but adults. Children who die by suicide are at high risk. And offspring with depression is actually on high risk too. So this is one alarming figure. But still, what I want to focus on is the 48 to 500 million people. In the old days, before social media, we were saying that for one person who died by suicide, that affects 6 people. But now with the social media, with the network that we know, they were saying that at least one person who died by suicide, there were at least 60 people to 135 people. They would be affected by suicide. If you don't mind me asking, how many of you know someone who died by suicide? In the audience, put up your hand. See, you can see so many hands. But put up your hands again. People want to look. There are so many people in the audience. You know someone who have died by suicide. Now you know. And there are so many people who have never heard about this topic before. So there are a lot of hidden issues among these. And this is another really alarming figure that I want to show to you. So this paper has talked about there are different groups of people bereaved by suicide. Of course, the core one is the suicide bereaved long term, meaning the core group, they have been suffering for a long time, but without saying anything to other ones. And then there are short-term people. Short-term meaning that, for example, maybe the 19 children that I talk about who killed themselves over the past few months, their peers, they might be suffering for a short term, okay? There are suicide affected. They may be the colleagues or the teachers or the friends who know about the suicides, but there are suicide exposed. And in Hong Kong, that's especially. This group is a group that people don't talk about. In many places in the world, there are big countries. For example, in the US, they kill themselves by gun, maybe in a garage or in their own home. But in Hong Kong, imagine someone who jumped from a building. How many people can see that accident? There'll be at least hundreds or thousands of people who can see that. Or, if you imagine, you go into the Dong Ti Sin, and then someone jump off from the station, and then the whole train would be affected. There are thousands of people, and that happens. So there are a lot of people actually exposed to that, and then you can never imagine how impactful that would be for those who are actually exposed to that. So I'll summarize a little bit for you. For those who are bereaved by suicide, there will be shame, there will be stigma, there will be social isolations, and there will be family disturbance. And the uniqueness of suicide bereavement compared with other forms of bereavement, there will be a sense of rejection. Imagine one of your loved ones die by suicide, and you will think that, why? Why didn't you tell me before you kill yourself? There's a sense of rejection. Why did you leave me behind? Things like that. So it's a unique feeling. And then there's a sense of responsibility. Many people who bereaved by suicide that we talk about, or we interview, they told us, I think I was responsible somehow for death because I didn't care enough. I didn't spend enough time. I didn't listen enough. There were a lot of self-blaming among themselves. So that makes suicide bereavement unique from other forms of bereavement. Also, there are horror or trauma symptoms. The family members that we interview for the book, there are a few cases who actually saw the loved one who jumped in front of them in their homes. So that kind of image or the video in the mind keep reminding them every single day of how traumatic that would be. So that makes suicide prevention and bereavement a unique issue. So again, this is the summary of the Lancet paper. So the risk factors for suicide bereavement including school-age children, surviving parents, offspring of people with depression, and that's a summary. But nowadays, because of the influence of positive psychology, many issues that we want to look at, instead of looking at just the negative impact, we want to find out if there is a possibility that people can learn from this traumatic experience. We call that post-traumatic growth. It's a hard topic to talk about because no one wants to have their loved one kill themselves. No one. But if things happen, could that be a possibility that people can learn from this negative experience? So we call that post-traumatic growth. This is a rather new topic to blending with suicide bereavement because at the beginning, suicide bereavement is not an easy topic to talk about. And then you want to talk about growth. That is hard to believe. But the point that I'm sharing this with you is I want you to think about when you talk to people with suicide bereavement, could that be a possibility that there would be growth and meaning out of this? When we talk about meaning, I'm sure you have read about Viktor Frankl's Men Searching for Meaning. That is the beginning of we talk about how we learn from traumatic experiences into some meaning-making process. So I really want to thank this wonderful group of people who have done a meta-analysis on looking at how post-traumatic growth might be happening among suicide loss survivors. They use the word survivors, but I use the word people bereaved by suicide. So I highlight this abstract of the article. They were saying that positive growth could happen only if we have enough social support from people, plus people are willing to self-disclose their bereavement to others. It's actually not easier. There are a lot of people with suicide bereavement, they don't want to tell others for many reasons. Because they feel that they are responsible, because they feel that maybe mental disorders are genetically based. If I tell people that I have someone who died by suicide, I might be suffering from mental illness too. especially for men too. They might be blamed for their wife's suicide because they are no close relationship. So there are a lot of stigma and discrimination that makes people don't want to talk about their suicide, bereavement. So self-disclosure and social support are actually the core mediators that lead to post-traumatic growth. So I'd love to share this article with you. So there are, if it is the first time you learn about post-traumatic growth, this is really a wonderful figure to show you. According to the founder of the one who talked about post-traumatic growth, there are 5 domains of post-traumatic growth. On your left-hand side, that is spiritual growth. Spiritual doesn't really mean religious belief. It means how you see the world, how you see nature, and how you see your life. That's spiritual growth. And then at the top one, you can see people might become more optimistic. They have more wisdom, they have more positive coping mechanism. And then there are, at the bottom, there are greater appreciation for life. They would see life is too short, and they will have a lot more appreciation. And then for this side, the red one is closer relationship with people. And then for the other one is new possibilities. The people that we talk, who suffer from suicide bereavement, after the traumatic experience, they have become volunteers to help the newly bereaved. So there are actually new learning from being people bereaved by suicide. So this is an amazing relationship between resilience, reflective rumination, and then why people become PTG and why people become PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder and post-traumatic growth. The 5 domains I have talked to you already. And people who cannot reach PTG, they have PTSD, which including, I'm sure you know, intrusion avoidance and hyperarousal. So one of the ways, as counselors, as professionals, we can help by helping people to be able to self-disclose and be able to bring social support for each other. Okay, let me see. Suicide bereavement is kind of like a new research topic, and there had not been too many research on this topic. So again, this wonderful group of researchers in Australia, they did a review of the effectiveness of intervention. For now, what they found is there had not been too many effective ways of dealing with suicide bereavement. Probably one of the most evidence-based is CBT, but beside that, it's actually peer social support. So instead of just always keep talking about, you need professional help, it's not just that. It's actually helping people to build their own social network and whatnot. So this is another really wonderful study. Okay. I hope I can invite the people bereaved by suicide in Hong Kong to come and talk to you, but I'm sure they're busy. So what we did was we partnered with the Samaritan Befrienders of Hong Kong. We interviewed 10 people bereaved by suicide. So we have 3 outputs. One is a RTHK episode. Another one is the book. Another one is a research output. So I would love to show you a short clip of the interviews that we did. I hope you don't mind. No? So you can really see how traumatic for them at the beginning of the bereavement.
Hong Kong has recently witnessed a series of suicide incidents. According to statistics from the Hong Kong Jockey Club Center for Suicide Research and Prevention, a total of 1,061 suicide cases were recorded in 2022, which was the highest number recorded before 2023. Many studies indicate that when someone takes their own life, it profoundly affects those around them. We called them the families of suicide victims. While the public is keenly concerned about suicide prevention, and the government has invested considerable resources to follow up, the pain of these families of suicide victims often lacks public attention.
跟住突然間我見到阿仔伸個頭出嚟，我就嚇親啦，我就嗌佢個名，跟住我就跑入喺廚房，已經趕唔切啦。到而家我真係睇到見到。
我係睇住佢跌落去，成個世界其實當其時係覺得好似毀滅咗咁樣。
自殺者親友啦，就唔單止係佢嘅即係死者嘅家人啦，亦都包括佢嘅朋友啦、同事、同學、鄰居等等。即係譬如佢喺一個公眾嘅場合，例如可能喺學校啊，喺個即係早會嘅時候，有個同學或者有個人喺上面即係跳咗落嚟，咁佢目睹呢一個事件，咁其實我哋稱呢一啲即係目擊嘅人咧，其實都係可以係一個自殺者嘅一個親友啊。而個影響包括咩咧？例如佢可能會不斷去回想翻當刻嗰個情景啦，甚至乎會影響到佢失眠啊、情緒低落啊、食唔到嘢啊，即係等等呢啲生活都好大嘅影響嘅。
咁我睇下電視嘅時候，就聽到個房裏邊點解有一啲好似啲金屬嘅聲，咁我就開門入去睇下咩事。咁原來佢已經將個窗花拆咗落嚟啊！ 個人就已經踎咗喺嗰個窗口度，我好想掹住佢，但係我咩都做唔到。其實呢個畫面， 到今日我都好清楚喺個腦度。
10 years ago, Samson witnessed his wife's suicide.
離開咗我。
And after all these years, the scenes of that moment are still vivid. Every time he mentions his wife, he is brought to tears.
咁成件事 就係咁樣喺嗰一瞬間幾秒鐘嘅時間，咁我太太就係咁離開咗我。結婚25年，我哋冇小朋友，佢嘅世界就係我，我嘅世界就係佢。佢忽然間咁樣走咗咧，我基本上成個人就係分裂咗，同埋完全冇晒方向。
Okay, so in this particular episode, we actually interviewed 3 people bereaved by suicide, and Samson's case actually really traumatic because he actually saw the wife jumping, and now he's still in this room, sleeping on the bed, the bed that the wife stepped on it and then jumped. So he's actually living with that every single day. Anyhow, so the reason why I want to show you this is to listen to the actual story of bereavement. Okay, right. So there had not been too many research on suicide bereavement in Hong Kong. So 20 years ago, I gave 150 a survey to 150 people bereaved by suicide. And one thing that I want to draw your attention is actually the first one. We asked the people bereaved by suicide and say, well, do you think suicide was a relief for the deceased? Actually, over 50% of the family members, they said that suicide was a relief for the bereaved. This is a really sad figure. 有冇諗過點解啊? The family members who think, well, suicide might be a good thing for them. This is really sad. 諗下。Thank you for saying that. Actually, besides of the identity of being a person bereaved by suicide, they were caregivers of people with mental disorders. That's another identity. People who kill themselves, more often they have chronic mental disorders. And the family members saw them suffering for a long time. So their family members actually thought maybe suicide is a relief for them because they don't have to suffer anymore. So these two identities, people bereaved by suicide plus caregivers of people with mental disorders, it's actually a really double heavy road that the people bereaved by suicide have to suffer. Anyhow, so this is a really big thing that why I do love to raise your attention to care for people bereaved by suicide. This is a topic that has not been discussed for years. So this is something that I hope that after today's talk, you can pay a lot more attention on those people. I'm not here to sell my book, but I just want to tell you that this is the second book that we published on this topic. 20 years ago, we published the one that interviewed people who bereaved by suicide for a few years. That book was called 留給在野的說話, the belated dialogue to the one who died by suicide. So that book, we invited the people bereaved by suicide, wrote letters, and then to the people who died by suicide. So we call that the letters 寄不出的信, the letters that could not be sent. So because people who died by suicide. So now this is the second book. It's called 遙遠的他. So in this book, we interview people, especially who bereaved by over 10 years. We wanted to find out how the impact of suicide bereavement affect their lives for over 10 years. Even though it's a small study, and we found that post-traumatic growth does exist. And only if we can help them to build a new social network, or what we call social capital, so that they can have new possibilities, they have new spiritual growth, they have new personal growth, they have new relationship built after this, and then we can actually bring post-traumatic growth to people. And I want to end my talk with a hope to you. Hong Kong is an amazing place. Why? We have a small place and we have 7.5 million people in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, to do research, we call that a population laboratory. Anything that you do, it can impact millions of people, even new initiative. So one of the natural experiments that we did in Hong Kong about suicide bereavement maybe 15 years ago, you might know there are 3 public mortuaries in Hong Kong. And public mortuaries deal with unnatural death, suicide, accident, homicide, and whatnot. So we did a natural experiment with these 3 mortuaries. In different mortuaries, we have different ways of engaging people who suffer from suicide bereavement. The first one, we have counselors who stationed at the mortuary So when the family members who have identified the bodies of those who died by suicide, after they have seen the forensic pathologist, we have counselors who are stationed in the mortuary and talk to the family members. Okay. The second way, we invited the forensic pathologist to give the information booklet about our suicide bereavement service to the family members. For the third way, we just put the information booklet in the mortuary and let the people pick if they want to pick. Guess which one is the more effective way that the family members would actually contact us afterwards? First, let me summarize again. First, we have the counselor stationed at the mortuary, so we give name cards to people. Second one, we ask the forensic pathologist to give the information to the family members. Third, like whatever you do in normally, we put the leaflet in the mortuary and let people pick if they want. Guess which is the most effective way that the family members will actually contact us afterwards? You would think, the first one, you would think. It's actually the second one. The second one is, the percentage is the same, almost the same as the first one. So this is against our assumption. We thought, if we have human touch, it will be okay. But this natural experiment is really amazing. It turns out that sometimes our intuition of thinking how to help people, it's different to the real life of people. So as long as the forensic pathologists give the information, then because they are the authoritative people in the setting, so if they ask people to give information, then people will actually take advice. And that saves a lot of costs. You know how expensive that is. We have counselors who station at the mortuary. So this is really amazing. So let me challenge the way you think about providing services to people. Sometimes that's why research is important. You need to find out what happened afterwards. So I actually published this as a commentary in Lancet and how to actively engage people. In our normal day practice in counseling, we wait for people to call us and then we wait for people to come to us. That is the third way. We distribute information and then wait for people. That is the least effective. We have to be actively engaged people, but we have to be smart too, because we don't have a lot of resources. So you need to think about how to actively engage people who suffer with different issues. Anyhow, to conclude my remark, I have about 10 minutes for discussion. I want to show you this. Edwin Snyderman is the father of suicidology. So he was actually the first psychologist and a researcher in suicide prevention. He started a lot of research, and his first study was actually about the same one that I did, interviewing people bereaved by suicide. So he was saying, indeed, in the case of suicide, the largest public health problem is neither the prevention of suicide nor the management of attempts, but the alleviation of the effects of stress in the survivor's victim of suicide death, whose life are forever changing. So that's actually the statement that he wrote 50 years ago. I have to say I agree and I disagree. All of these people who are suffering from suicidal behavior are our attention and concerns. But what he was saying that is people who die by suicide are foregone, they left. But there are people who are left behind that suffer a lot, and they are under-researched, under-recognized, under-helped. So that is the message that I want to bring to you. There are a lot of hidden population in our society, they suffer from this kind of bereavement, and they have never talked about this with anyone. So if you have colleagues, you have friends who suffer from this, open up and talk about this topic with them, because they have never had a chance to talk to people about their traumatic experience. So I would love to open the floor for Q&A and discussions. This is a topic that we need to talk more instead of just listen. Thank you for your attention.
好啦，呢個時候咧，我哋大家可以發問。We open the floor for Q&A. If you have, please raise your hand. 咁我哋可以俾大家發問嘅時候，可以舉一舉手。咁我哋會行埋嚟俾個咪你嘅。有冇啊？隨便問。係 ，OK。
Hello, Paul. So nice to meet you again. So from what you described, I'm very interested in the death note written. If there is death note written by the people taking their own life. So how does the death note affect the healing process of the people bereaved by suicide? Because I think that is a very interesting point, because if there is no death note, so there's a lot of imaginations about the reason of death. But if there is death note, yes, we kind of, as if I am the person bereaved by the suicide, I can, the rumination, the direction of rumination, I can have I can guess the reason, the actual reason. So I would like to ask you about the death note. If there is a death note, the insight about the death note, and how does it impact the healing process of people bereaved by the suicide? Thank you.
That's actually a really, really good question. I talked to the people bereaved by suicide. They have different reactions. As you said, those who didn't leave the suicide notes, there will be a lot of guessing and why and why and why. And even for those who left suicide notes, some of the family members would tell me, how come the notes were not addressed to me? It was addressed to others. And sometimes the content of the suicide notes, as I said, is about insurance policy number and how many money and blah, 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 blah. So there were no content, no emotional content or sentimental content in the suicide notes. So there's no easy way to answer your question, but anyhow, so people bereaved by suicide react differently. So with or without, there are different interpretations, but still they hope that there are suicide notes. But what is complicating now, it's actually the social media. So a lot of people left suicide messages on social media. And some of those messages are left for the fans or for the friends of the social media, not to the family members. So there are a lot of guessing, still blaming, and actually a lot of guilt raised by that. So I wish I could give you a simple answer, but no, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? In front.
Thank you. So you spoke earlier about how masculinity is actually causing a lot more men to commit suicide compared to women. So how do you think we can reduce the stigmatization or the stereotypical masculinity to reduce these rates in men? Thank you.
That's usually a really good question. I actually was talking to another suicide prevention service yesterday, and I do believe that in terms of counseling and psychotherapy, we need to be quite gender specific. We need to develop some male-oriented services. There has been some by Caritas and then Hong Kong Mental Health Association, especially for men. When they developed the service, they were a little bit hesitate whether people will actually seek help, because men don't seek help. But after they have been running that for decades, actually men are looking for these kind of services. The waiting lists are actually quite long. So we need to develop more male-oriented services. And also, there are some research has been saying that men experience mental disorders differently. Take an example for eating disorder. Eating disorder in DSM, they would describe that people with eating disorder, they will purge, or they will put their finger in the mouth and then make themselves vomit and whatnot. Some of the men with eating disorders don't do that. Men with eating disorders, they will do over-exercise to keep themselves fit instead of doing purging. So there has not been so much description about how men and female experience mental disorders. So now there are some research in the US starting to do that. So I think that is something that Hong Kong can do more. For example, chronic depression, I'm sure you know, men experience chronic depression different to females. So that is something that I guess if you have a experience to talk to men, you want to explore how different they experience mental disorders. Yeah, I hope I answer your question. Thank you.
啱啱頭先有另一位。
My question is kind of similar to the previous one on masculinity. So I would like to ask on hierarchy, because Asian is typically a hierarchical culture, and taking Japan as a typical example, it's very focused on the shame culture. So how does the culture background affect your research or anything?
That another thing is a really big question. Let me give you another thing to think about. I'm sure you guys know the ecological theory of seeing issues. The outer circle is the culture or religious spirituality circle. 有冇聽過啊？嗰個 ecological theory. Besides of suicide, another research interest that I do is studying at the hidden youth, 隱蔽青年. Culture has a big thing to affect the way how young people become 隱蔽青年 hidden youth. And one of the biggest thing is about academic pressure in Asian society. Because men, especially young men, they feel shameful that they fail from the school system. And because of that, they have no motivation to seek job afterwards or receive training. And then draw them into reclusive at their own homes, become hidden youth. So culture is a big thing. And hierarchical issues, I have to say, in Hong Kong, it's less negatively impactful to men than other places. Why I'm saying that is we did a survey with interviewing men and female about gender equality issues in Hong Kong. Actually, the perception of gender equality between female and males in Hong Kong, they are much closer than the World Health Organization of what they found. So even though we say that in Asian country we have more male-dominating females, in Hong Kong the gender equality is actually quite closer to other places. So, but that is why in Hong Kong I would think that the gender ratio for suicide prevention is 2-to-1, but in many Western societies, it's actually 4-to-1, 4 men to 1 female. So I would guess that the so-called gender issues or hierarchy issues is not impacting Hong Kong population so much. That is a good thing, I guess. One thing that we should keep saying, Hong Kong is quite gender equal.
好，睇下現場仲有冇朋友？係。
多謝 Professor Wong。唔好意思，其實我想用中文問咧，因為我覺得比較容易表達翻我自己嗰個問題。其實香港咧而家越嚟越多長者，因為個年紀即係嗰個即係年齡嗰個即係人好老先會過身啦。咁其實咧香港嘅長者佢面對住佢嘅子女嘅自殺，同埋可能係講緊一啲即係年青人嘅父母佢。即係嗰個年齡咧，其實好大分別噶嘛。一個90歲嘅長者，佢面對佢嘅仔女嘅自殺，同埋一個可能50歲嘅即係人士去面對佢仔女嘅自殺咧，其實嗰個心態上或者嗰個佢哋面對嗰個情況咧，會唔會有啲分別咯？嚇，即係喺你嗰個即係研究裏邊，或者你面對一啲個案。
多謝你嘅問題啦嚇。Let me allow me to respond this in Cantonese. 我冇特登再去細拆翻究竟年齡點樣影響佢哋嘅 bereavement， 因為呢類型嘅研究香港我哋都真係唔係做得好多。咁但係始終白頭人送黑頭人，永遠都係慘痛嘅一個經歷嚟嘅。咁我哋其實 actually 點解會搞咗呢個 seminar 個 focus on separating and loss 咧？其實我哋年幾前 plan 嗰陣時咧，除咗講 suicide bereavement 之外咧，係因為嗰陣時有好多人移咗民之後咧，有啲遺留咗落嚟嘅老人家。 咁其實嗰個 social loneliness 同埋 isolation，我覺得係好緊要嘅。咁再加埋，如果再加埋 suicide bereavement 就仲更加啦。咁但係我冇一個好明確嘅答案俾到你，因為其實呢類型嘅研究全個世界都唔係好多。好多時我哋研究都係淨係 focus 喺一個叫 suicide bereavement 呢個 context， 冇再細拆翻究竟男同女或者 age 嘅 differences 咯。咁但係你都可以 imagine 一個老人家，佢如果尤其是而家少子化，佢50歲嘅所謂小朋友啦死咗，再加埋自己可能係已經一個獨居嘅老人，其實嗰種傷痛係唔知成幾多倍嘅。咁所以 that's another important issue to look at。我哋嘅 research 冇咁細拆到究竟個 age 同埋嗰個 gender difference 有啲咩唔同。唔該晒。
好，咁啊呢個時間，因為時間嘅關係咧，咁我相信之後嘅問題啦，可能咧稍後你見到 Professor Wong 嘅時候可以再問佢。咁我哋而家咧break 先 ，we're going to take a 15 minutes break and then come back in 11:45. Thank you.
Thank you for your attention, guys. Thank you.